It's really noisy. Hey, there's a big ray of sunlight coming. So now we're trying again. Let's say a little prayer that Robert can come on. So we got that ray of sunlight. No answer. Wow, what happened there? Let me try again. People, the sun is right there. It's right at that spot. It's right there. Okay, trying again. Connecting. Wow. Wow.
Whoa. Yeah. How about that? Okay. Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. How's this? This is pretty close.
Okay, you're pretty good. Okay, it's very good. Okay, wonderful. So, Robert, can you see the sunlight coming through the clouds?
That's beautiful. Yes, very beautiful.
You know, it reminds me of a book you wrote for children to teach children forgiveness. What was the name of the book?
That was Rising Above the Storm Clouds.
And it was like an airplane flying up.
There,
Oh, there you have it.
There it is, right there, Rising Above the Storm Clouds.
What language is that in?
Well, it's in a number of languages, but this one happens to be in the King's English.
Well, it's funny because we're reading with mirror effect.
Oh.
I couldn't read it. Can you put it up again?
Yes. Here we go.
So, rising above the storm clouds. Can you get that, people? It's mirrored. It's a mirror image. And I thought it was Russian for a while, or some letters. Well, you could almost make a Hebrew letter or two. And I was wondering, what language is that in?
It is in English.
Robert, look at that sky. Look at them from above the storm clouds. The light is pouring down from above the storm clouds.
This is great.
Isn't
no
that wonderful?
Rain. Yeah, no rain.
Look at, let me show you. Let me show you. We had a tremendous storm. Look at all that cloud. Whoa. And actually 2 hours ago, it was amazing. And they predicted last night that at 7 o'clock it would be finished. Oh, there's a rainbow. Hold on. Look at the first time we've ever got a rainbow on our Sunrise Stroll Chat. People, you see the rainbow? I've never seen a rainbow at dawn. People, there we got a rainbow. Can you see it? It's in the screen. Maybe it's not clear. I wonder if I can do zooming with shared screen. Let me see here. But the rainbow is there still. It's probably faint on the camera take up. Yeah, it should be hitting there into that cloud. You know, it's funny, I can't. Oh, I can. I can move the screen there. Look at the rainbow. Can you see it now? You see the white piece of cloud down below on the bottom right corner, and then above that to the left, to the top right, to the top left is the rainbow is there. Can you guys see it? The rainbow?
Yes.
I hope you can see it. And then look around here. See, we have blue sky over here. So that's the end of the storm. That's the west. We're looking west here. And this actually half an hour ago, this sky was totally clear without any clouds. So maybe something will still come. But I was amazed this morning at the accuracy and the precision of the prognosis. Sometimes they're changing the prognosis every day, but this is, the storm is over. Look at all the rain that fell. So the ground is very wet. So we're going to stay here at Magdala on the gravel in order to have our conversation with you, Dr. Enright. So people, I want to introduce Dr. Enright with his big smile, because he has brought a lot of big smiles to a lot of people teaching forgiveness. And I think we should cut to the chase, since we started a little bit late. We were hoping to get in a little bit early, so it's 6:30. And I think I started, I guess, about 15 minutes ago. How long ago did we start? Maybe 10 minutes ago. So we have a good 20 minutes, hopefully, to have a nice chat. And the readings today are very, actually, in the first line, there's the word about forgiveness. And then the gospel's message today is, the first reading is from Hosea, who's a great prophet of reconciliation, with God. And then the gospel is about the two great commandments. Now, can you love somebody against whom you have a lot of rancor and ill will because they treated you unjustly? Is that easy to love somebody?
That is extremely difficult.
But
That
maybe,
is,
maybe
yeah.
there's great love there, Robert, because when people are nice to you, to love them is not so difficult. But when
Right.
Jesus said to love your enemy, so in that sense as well, there's an issue. But actually, your work has helped people to cure some of that rancor and some of that difficulty.
Yes. A lot of times it's in the family context. It could be in a work context. It could be in a house of worship context. Whenever people are unjust to others, forgiveness comes in and ought to come in as a healing strategy.
Now, you also did it in a high security prison recently. So it could also be none of the listeners I think are in high security prison, but that's also a possibility, right?
Yeah, in fact, I just got done looking at the galley proofs for our publication on the maximum security prison study today. I was on it all day today. And
Wow.
basically, what we find is most of the men whom we interviewed have been hurt very, very deeply in childhood or adolescence. And they have a lot of anger, anxiety, and depression. And that's not really addressed in the correctional system. And what we call the trauma of childhood. And so we brought them through a forgiveness program, and they ended up going from clinically depressed and anxious to being normal in their depression and anxiety. And what went up for them is empathy. In other words, a willingness to step inside the shoes of other people, which was very, very difficult for them to do because of the abuse they have suffered. And so it's like the first time in a maximum security prison setting that we have research showing that forgiveness can do very wonderful things for those who've been abused by others and have rarely talked about it.
There are so many dark clouds in people's lives, Robert. So many dark clouds.
Sadly, Father Amen, you're right. And if we're like the men in the maximum security prison, we don't talk about it much.
So
We
there's
hold it
darkness there too.
inside. Yes, yes, we bear it ourselves. And that's not necessarily the way it ought to be.
Wow. Now, Robert, before we talk more about forgiveness, I was wondering, one of the things at the Jerusalem conference, and I have a link for that in our chat, people can look at afterwards, and all the talks, the wonderful talks that were given there are still available on your website at that link, internationalforgiveness.com, I think, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Then one thing that impressed me very much, I think that was very helpful for people to get. A lot of people find it hard to ever think about forgiving some particular person for some particular deed. And you explained what forgiveness is not regarding the evil deeds that were done. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is forgiveness not?
Well, for one thing, when you forgive, you don't excuse the wrong. The wrong was unjust, it is unjust, and will always be unjust, whether you forgive or not.
Could you say that again? Could you say that again and say it slowly?
Sure. When you forgive, you don't make excuses for the misbehavior. You don't say, oh, it's all right when I'm forgiving. What they're doing wasn't so bad. No, you say it was bad, and it is bad now, and what they did will always be bad. And so my response isn't to the injustice, it's to the person. I change my attitude and my stance toward the person. When I forgive, we find in our research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I'm a professor, we find that when people forgive, they don't really forget. In other words, if you've had a serious knee injury, for example, you don't forget what happened, but you remember in new ways once you're healed. And so forgive and forget is not quite accurate. We forgive and remember in new ways so that we're aware of the situation so it doesn't happen again to us. And another big one that forgiveness is not, this one, when people don't understand it, it gets forgiveness in a lot of trouble. When you forgive, you don't necessarily reconcile. Reconciliation is when two or more people come together again in mutual trust. You can forgive someone without trusting the person because you're trying to be good to the person who isn't good to you, but you can do so at a distance if the person is continuing to be unfair. So you may or may not reconcile with the other. And when people equate forgiving with reconciliation, then forgiveness gets in trouble and I get in trouble because people say, how dare you talk about forgiveness? You're telling me to go back into an abusive relationship that could kill me. That's dangerous. But no, when you forgive, you're not necessarily engaging in a negotiation strategy. You're engaging in the practice of a moral virtue. And another thing that forgiveness is not, other than excusing, forgetting, and reconciling, is you do not abandon the quest for justice. You see, forgiveness is not either or. Either I strive for justice or I forgive. It's both and. I can forgive and ask the person to stop being mean, to stop stealing from me, to stop using harsh words. And so when you forgive, you can be strong and say what you're doing is not fair and let's try to work this out. And a key here is when you forgive first, how you ask for justice and that for which you ask might be more accurate, more balanced, even more gentle than if you're frothing with anger.
That's a marvelous answer. And already in that answer, I think, Dr. Enright, if let's say the internet broke down now and we didn't even get a chance to say goodbye, you gave us a lot to think about. A lot.
Well, yeah.
That's a lot of, it's a lot of information or a lot of insight into forgiveness that we need to go back on and ponder. And maybe somebody in the chat has very deep hurt from long ago. And now they need to process this and go back and say, okay, what's the issue there? Maybe I'm afraid of letting the person off the hook.
That's right. And that's not what forgiveness is. Forgiveness is being good to those who aren't good to you. It's offering a hand up to the other, saying, come up again, come up to a better way. A lot of times people won't take your hand on that. They might laugh at you, call you weak. But no matter what they say or do regarding what forgiveness is, forgiveness as a moral virtue is goodness, and it's always good, whether we're laughed at or not.
That's awesome, Robert. I think this is awesome. There's, I think forgiveness also could take time because there's a lot to process.
Indeed, yeah. I know St. Paul tells us to not let the sun go down on your anger, but a lot of people misinterpret that. They say, oh no, I've been treated terribly badly and I have some anger, maybe I shouldn't sleep tonight. But his word for anger was har orgismos. Har orgismos. The prefix intensifies the word orgi. And so it's a frothing, plotting, revengeful anger. Don't let the sun go down on that. And then it takes a long time to get rid of the other anger in your heart because you've been treated unfairly and we're human. And when, for example, you talked about the maximum security prison men with whom we worked. We worked with each man for 24 weeks, once a week for an hour.
Wow.
So that's a long time. And Suzanne Friedman, a former student of mine, now at the University of Northern Iowa, worked with incest survivors one-on-one for an hour a week for 54 weeks.
Wow.
Over a year. but they went from clinically depressed to non-depressed. It was
Wow.
well worth the time. So you can't just say, I'm not going to let the sun go down on my normal anger. That's justified. Not the frothing, revengeful anger. It takes time to work on forgiveness. It's a pathway. It's a process. And it's a learning process, and a very rich one and very worthwhile.
Are there steps you would recommend, Robert? Let's say now somebody is maybe even in the frothing revenge part. Let's say we go to that extreme because, and that's obviously part of the problems of our world. It's happening in the political scene, people taking revenge on people who did them bad. It's taking place on the civil scene where you have murders, you have people settling scores. It's taking place within even marriage. It's taking place maybe between siblings over inheritance issues and over other issues between people at work. People got a promotion, people didn't get a promotion, or in a classroom with children, or all kinds of things, you know? Are there steps?
Right. Yeah, we do have a series of steps that we use characteristically, regardless of the hurt you have experienced. Of course, it might take longer or shorter, depending on who hurt you and how deeply you've been hurt. But the basic steps, they're described in some of my self-help books, like 8 Keys to Forgiveness is one of my books. That's the manual we use in the maximum security person. But here's the short version. First, we realize we've been treated unfairly, and that injustice, not being healed in our heart, is bringing us down. So we examine the level of anger or sadness, the distractions in your life, the fatigue. And one thing we notice that happens very subtly is a person starts getting more pessimistic in their philosophy of life. They tend to see the glass as half empty. And they're almost not aware of it, where they become mistrustful of a lot of people. So when we put all that together, we ask, how are you really doing in your heart from how you've been hurt? Many, many people aren't doing well. And so then we ask, would you like to try forgiveness? Well, they say, what is that? We say, well, you will try to engage in a moral virtue, because that's what forgiveness is, like justice, patience, kindness, where you paradoxically are going to try to be good to those who aren't good to you. You're going to be in the realm of mercy rather than justice. You're going to try and be merciful to the other person. And that might sound ridiculous, but there are stories going back thousands of years on that. Joseph forgiving his half-brothers who wanted to kill him, sold them into slavery in Egypt. He forgave them. The prodigal son came home, and the father ran to him and forgave him. So being good to others has historical precedent in many of the ancient literatures. And so when people say yes, we say, okay, but you won't be excusing or forgetting. You won't be necessarily reconciling, but forgiveness opens yourself to that. And you won't throw justice away. Would you like to do this? And forgiveness is the person's choice, yes or no. If the person does, then we go to thinking exercises. And the thinking exercises are to reawaken in you as the forgiver who the one who hurt you is as a person. That person who hurt you, and it could take time to understand this, is more than the behaviors against you. The person is likely a wounded person who dumped the truck onto you because they've been wounded. We take a look at your common humanity. The fact that you both will die one day. When you cut, you bleed. You have unique DNA. You're both special, unique, and irreplaceable. And then if the person has a belief system, a Judeo-Christian system, for example, we ask, going right back to Genesis 1, are you made in the image and likeness of God? And if the answer is yes, then we say, is the one who hurt you made in the image and likeness of God? And with a hard swallow and a gasp, the person who has this more spiritual philosophy would have to say yes. So you're dealing with a wounded person, maybe a frightened, confused person, who's special, unique, and irreplaceable like you, who's made in the image and likeness of God, which can start softening the heart with compassion, where you can bear the pain for the person so you don't throw the pain back to that person. And we ask them to stand in the pain of what happened so you don't throw the pain back to the person or to your own loved ones or children who weren't the one who hurt you.
Robert, can I interrupt you a second?
Sure.
You just triggered a thought. Before you came on this morning, I was pointing out the Mount of Beatitudes.
Uh-huh.
And the Mount of Beatitudes is right up here. Let me see if I get it right here. Sorry about this little, I thought I had it. Wow, what's funny? What's going on here? Okay, so it should be here. That's funny, it's the first time I'm doubting it because of all the plastic there in the covers. Oh, I know why, because I have the screen into a zoom scope and I only have half the screen, so I'm not calibrating well. So there it is, it's right behind that bush there in the center, between the two trees. And that's the Mount of Beatitudes. And one of the lines that's very famous is, blessed are the peacemakers. But there was another one that came to mind just spontaneously this morning. Blessed are those who suffer injustice for the sake of the kingdom. So you were asking people there, or you're suggesting that it's possible for the sake of the good of the other to also bear something for the recovery eventually of the person.
Exactly.
Those who suffer injustice, because God's kingdom wants to redeem and recover. And so by the ability to have a little broader shoulder to bear a little bit of injustice for a time, that can really advance the cause of the kingdom for somebody else.
That's right, because you're giving the person a chance to see you're bearing the pain for that person, which is very heroic, actually. And
yes,
the one who forgives, who can bear the pain, we find in our research, those who bear that pain and forgiveness realize that they, as forgivers, are stronger than they thought they ever were.
wow.
Because you're not trying to throw this pain back to the other, because if you throw the pain back to the other, they're going to toss it back to you and you keep throwing stones at each other. And that could be, nasty comments or nasty comments about the person to others. And that stops, where you try now to do no harm to the other, because forgiveness is an act of mercy. And so when you're merciful, you will do no harm to the person as an end in and of itself. You will bear the pain as an end in and of itself. And because forgiveness deals with the moral virtue of goodness, you will try to do something good for the other. It might be a returned phone call or a text, or even saying something good about that person to another, and you'd be amazed at what that does to your heart. It starts chipping away at the stony coldness of the heart as you start giving to the other. Aristotle used the term magnanimity or largeness of heart to describe this. As your heart gets larger, it gets softer. And another paradox of forgiveness is, as you give this to the other, who from a position of justice doesn't deserve it, you are the one who is healed, offering healing to the other and offering healing to the relationship. And at the very least, we find in our science, those who forgive themselves experience surprising healing of their heart that they could literally take to their grave. Because we've actually worked in hospice situations with women in their 80s who've been carrying grudges for 40 years. They've walked this path of seeing the humanity in the other, of bearing the pain, of giving something good to them, drawing them to their bedside and actually reconciling. And you know what happened to these women when they were dying? They were increasing in hope all the way.
Wow.
They were dying and their hope was increasing as they were getting their family back, you see. So forgiving is for the other, but paradoxically, so much of the healing comes back to you.
There was a question just asked here by one of our participants this morning in the Stroll and Chat, Robert, Professor Enright, that the question is, can you forgive somebody who has died already?
Well, let's think about that. Can you be good to someone who has died? Absolutely yes. How? Well, let's say it's a family situation. You could recapture a good reputation in the family, not because of what happened that was unjust, but because they probably have done a lot of good in the family as well. You can donate to charity in the person's name. You see, there's a lot of ways you can be good. You can pray for the person, okay? And so there's a lot of ways you can be good to those who are deceased. In fact, I am what they call a blogger for a major psychology magazine in the United States called Psychology Today. And my blog site on Psychology Today is called The Forgiving Life. And one of my blogs, I have 82 essays on there. And one of my blogs is asking that question and answering it. Can you forgive the deceased? Obviously, the short answer is yes. You could start today by donating to a charity in the person's name. There you go. That is giving a gift to the one who is no longer with us. And you know what? You can then be released from a stony cold heart from someone who's no longer with you.
Robert, I love you talking about stony cold heart, because actually yesterday we did a very difficult stroll and chat, and the readings were very tough. You have the prophet Jeremiah really condemning his own people for their infidelity and hardness of heart. And the song was, if today you hear his voice, harden not your heart.
Yeah.
And then Jesus was talking with some of those who really opposed his action and who were calumniating him, that said, you were casting out devils by the power of Satan. And this whole thought that you gave now about chipping away at a stony heart, and a stony heart might be a very kind heart to somebody else, but it might be a very stony heart to another person.
Exactly. Yes, and that's why it's so important that we bring forgiveness into the conversation in families, in communities, in houses of worship, that we don't do enough. We think we know what forgiveness is because we've heard the word, but how many times have you seen communities deliberately say, we want to put forgiveness on the table along with justice, and have a fair community, but also a merciful and forgiving community? It doesn't happen nearly enough. So many people are walking around with these stony cold hearts, and they don't know what to do. Here's just one example. As you know, Father Amen, I just got done recently working in the maximum security prison. Took a year to do it because it was 24 weeks with one group and 24 weeks with another. And then I met with the men when it was over. And one of the men said to me, I was abused terribly as a child. If I had had this forgiveness intervention when I was 12 years old, I would not be in this maximum security prison for life. He's in for life. And I think he's right, because he would have then cast off all that animosity, all that hatred that tumbled onto others, where he hurt them gravely because he was hurt gravely. And if he could have softened his heart toward his family members, he never would have taken it out on others, and he'd be a free man today. Forgiveness wasn't there for him. Honestly, I think that's a tragedy.
Now, Professor Robert, that's a tragedy, but let's look at the other side of it. One of the great features of your work is forgiveness education. And I remember after the conference in Jerusalem, you made some great progress in together with collaboration of Muslim and Jewish and Christian people, to get forgiveness education into schools.
Correct.
Maybe we have some teachers here, and how could that happen? How does forgiveness education reach children? If, let's say, the parents don't know about it, they're tied up themselves in a bunch of issues, and how can we get another avenue to bring forgiveness to the awareness of such a child like this maximum security prison person you talked about?
Well, we do have curriculum guides on forgiveness education from age 4 to age 18, where we teach forgiveness through stories, like my book I showed earlier, Rising Above the Storm Clouds. And we have children and adolescents read these books and see how story characters navigate conflict. Sometimes it escalates to chaos, and other times they're gentle with one another. And then we gently ask them to think about people who've hurt them and how to deal with it on the playground. And it has built now where we have these forgiveness curriculum guides in over 30 countries of the world. And we will be, Father, amen, we hope, if the pandemic is over, by the grace of God, we will be in Galilee starting in September with 20 classrooms in the Galilee region of 5th grade students, teaching them about this simultaneously in Hong Kong and in Northern Ireland,
Wow,
Belfast
that's
and
awesome.
surrounding communities. And they're all going to get together. Once the teachers teach this curriculum in 5th grade, Hong Kong, Northern Ireland, and Galilee, in July of 2022, they're all going to come right here to Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow.
And they're going to have the International Forgiveness on Love and Forgiveness right
Wow.
here. And we're going to hopefully expand this forgiveness education program even further than that.
Look at the clouds. Look at the clouds, Robert. Look at the
Wow,
clouds,
beautiful.
everybody. And you see the light is streaming down to the left, northward. So the sun is way up here, and the light is pouring down behind the clouds. And you are bringing down so much light, Robert. We thank the Lord for you, that you're bringing down so much light behind the clouds that are in so many people's lives. And even if that 12-year-old didn't get the forgiveness education and now he's in a maximum security prison, in the course of the last year, a lot of light came behind his clouds
Very
into his
true.
life.
I think that's a great way to look at it, Father Raymond. You're right. He now can be a conduit of good within the correctional system for those who are in a cell next to him and they're hurting because of what happened to them when they were 8 years old. He now has a new purpose in life, even though he will never be getting out of prison. You're absolutely correct.
I would think, Robert, thank you. I would think that a lot of people who are on our stroll and chat every morning also have a deep spiritual longing. And I would imagine many of them are involved in different ministries. We have people watching who are Jewish, who are Muslim, who are, I would say, secular, people who are obviously Christian in all the different colors of our Christian rainbow. We have people who are in various different communities. And I imagine that at least some of our people who are participating are involved or know a pastor closely. And so not just in the formal schools, but this could be brought into youth groups to do your storybook with children in any context.
Absolutely correct. You can do it in family context. It doesn't just have to be in school, it's wherever we have little ones, children and adolescents. It can be brought in, absolutely. And we just finished a large study, for example, all Muslims in Iran, in the 3 largest cities of Iran, 8th graders. These students had about 12 weeks of forgiveness education through stories, Islamic stories, and the Quran, and they ended up reducing in anger, they ended up reducing in ethnic prejudice, and they ended up increasing also in a sense of empathy toward others. And so there's an example right there. And then in Galilee, when we start in September, it's going to be Jewish, Muslim, and Christian, all working on this.
Is that in the public school system, or is that
it's going to be in private and public.
Private and public. Very good, excellent.
Yes. We're hoping for 20 schools at least.
And we're here in Galilee right now, so the light is coming in already.
That's where, and we've centered it in Galilee. That's where we're going to be.
Wow, awesome. Awesome. This is magnificent news. This is absolutely awesome news, people. We need to spread this good news. Let me look at the clock here. I forgot to know. We're probably gone way over time, but that's okay. Yeah, we're gone a little bit over time, but that's fine. So I think what we'll do, Robert, is we'll let people also send in questions, and maybe we can bother you another day if there are a series of questions to answer or some other thoughts. And is there something special on your heart you'd like to say now?
Well, I would say the biggest thing I find with regard to forgiveness at the end of the day is what I call legacy. When people look back on their lives and what's going to happen. They end up, when they study forgiveness and really work on it, they realize that legacy isn't leaving money to others. It's whether you're going to leave anger or love in this
That's
world.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and I do find that here's what's so interesting about anger and love. Your anger, if you keep that anger and don't work on getting rid of it, you actually can give that to your children as an inheritance, who will grow up and give it to their children, so that your grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren will actually have your unrest in their heart 100 years from now. But if we can look at this idea of loving your neighbor, okay, as yourself, which is in Leviticus and Mark's reading today, if you can leave more love in this world in the hearts of your children, that love, think about it, could be in your grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren, something of you very much alive, very much wholesome, helping them, nurturing their family, while you're not even in the East anymore. So there's something eternal about this thing called love, that if you start leaving it into others' hearts from your heart, you might be leaving something eternal in this world. That's why
Wow.
forgiveness is so important.
And this is very important for the, also not just for personal family histories, but also between peoples and countries and populations.
Absolutely. Yes, sometimes the animosity between groups can go on for hundreds of years. And you know what? Forgiveness needs to be part of that conversation into the peace movement. And it hasn't yet, but we're working on it.
God bless you, Robert. This is absolutely awesome. It's beginning to drizzle again here, so I'm heading towards a little shelter so the camera doesn't get wet. And I want to thank you very much for joining us. And on the YouTube version that I will upload today, I'm going to cut out all the part of the video at the beginning where we were making attempts that failed to connect you. So that will be the cleaner edition of the video. The Facebook one, I don't know how to do that, because I'm going to save this now and share it. So then I just came up here to the altar, to the back of Ducan Altum. You can see inside, because it's sheltered. Yeah. I'm sheltered here from the rain, you see. So I just want to say thank you so much. And this whole idea of legacy is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Well, the people are my teachers. They show it to me. And I think your stroll and chat in the mornings are absolutely wonderful, Father Eamon. Thank you for doing it.
You take time to see those?
I do. I'm in there some of the times, yes.
Wow, wow.
So there you go.
Dr. Robert, thank you so much for being with us this morning. And we're delighted. I think our people are delighted. I can speak for them, and we'll be in touch, okay? And they can visit your website. And we also put in the link for the Jerusalem conference we had there 4 years ago. And so it's an opportunity for people to see those brilliant talks.
Wonderful. Well, all the best to all of you. And thank you for having me, Father.
And God bless you from Galilee. Come back.
Okay, indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.